Value is so important in the creation of art that a special term has been created to describe the use of light and dark in a piece of art. Chiaroscuro is the use of strong contrasts between light and dark. These bold contrasts affect the whole composition. This approach was widely used by Renaissance and Baroque artists. It looks like there is only one, but very strong light source that creates very dark shadows. The light itself molds the objects and brings them to life. It makes the scene appear very dramatic and emotional. So when you want to add drama to your art, add value contrast. Chiaroscuro is also a technical term. It describes a method to achieve an appearance of volume in modeling three-dimensional objects and figures. In this method, if light is coming from one predetermined direction, then light and shadow will conform to a set of rules. These rules can be applied to any object, no matter how simple or complex it is. Let's take a look at the sphere. When you think about it, the order of tonal values is very logical. It is based on how much light the surface receives and reflects. There are two distinctive sides to an object with one light source. One side, that is exposed to light and thus receives more light, is the light side. The opposite side is the dark side. It does not receive any direct light from the source. Always keep values on the light side lighter than values on the dark side. There are two kinds of shadows that occur when light shines on an object. Form shadow is an area of the object that does not get any direct light. Form shadow starts with the shadow core. It is the darkest part of the shadow, as it does not get any direct light, but also lacks any reflected light. The shape of a core shadow determines the appearance of the object. A cast shadow is created when the light source is obstructed by the object and casts a shadow onto the surface. Cast shadow is normally darker next to the object. Between form shadow and cast shadow, the cast shadow is usually darker in value. Here is the value order that is created by a light source, also called chiaroscuro. Highlight, light or halftone, form shadow, reflected light, and cast shadow. Let's see how the chiaroscuro rule works in real life. When light hits an object, it illuminates some of its sides to various degrees based on the side's position to the light source. And if that light is blocked, then the shadows are created. The brightest area of the light side is the one that receives the most of the direct light, and it is called a highlight. As the surface curves, the light reaches it at an angle, so these parts get only a portion of that light. These areas are called light or halftone. Some areas don't get any direct light, so they have nothing to reflect. That would be our form shadow. The darkest area of the shadow, the core shadow, is right where the form turns away from the light source. Core shadow determines the appearance of the object. Every object exists in some kind of setting or environment. There are other objects around or next to it. As the light reaches the surroundings, it bounces off the surfaces, and now even the darkest side does get some light. It is called reflected light. Some light gets blocked by the object. The object creates or casts a shadow on the table surface. In this case, the cast shadow is formed by the edges of the bottle, where halftone turns into shadow. Cast shadow is always darker next to the object. So here are the main elements of chiaroscuro shading pattern: center light or highlight, halftone or light, shadow with the core shadow, reflected light, and cast shadow. You can break these elements into more specific parts, but as long as you remember these 5, you can apply that to any shading you do. Let's check out how we can apply the chiaroscuro pattern to basic geometric forms. If you take a look at a cube when it is lit with a single light source, you will see how light and shadow mold the form. That's our highlight value. This is your light to halftone value. That is your shadow side. We do get some reflected light, of course. And the cast shadow. Sphere is a perfect object to see how chiaroscuro value pattern works. To make this circle look like a solid ball, we need to apply value in a specific order. Highlight, halftone, shadow, reflected light, cast or drop shadow. Gradual value change creates an illusion of roundness. We use the exact same pattern for a cylinder. We just change the shapes of the value elements. Here is the side that gets the most light. If we lower the light source, the most lit area would be here. But the order of the values remains the same. Highlight curves into halftones until the surface curves away from the source and forms a core shadow and shadow, some reflected light, and the cast shadow. Same steps for the cone shading. The only difference is the shape of the shading areas. Highlight, light and halftone, core shadow and shadow, reflected light, and a cast shadow. Here is an example of how an object changes appearance if we modify the core shadow. By making the contrast really sharp between light and shadow, we can create an edge. Now, instead of a round surface, we have a pyramid with well-defined sides and corners. The pattern, though, stays the same. The lightest area is the closest to the light source and is facing it directly. Area further from the source gets less light and is slightly darker. This side does not get any direct light, but gets plenty of reflected. Please note that all objects that you see around you do not have an outline. We see them by defined edges or contrasts between lights and darks. So even if you start with a linear drawing, when you shade, you incorporate the outline into the shading. Once you know the chiaroscuro pattern and understand the logic behind it, you will be able to apply it to any complex form. So, what are you waiting for?